Day 6 of Seahawks training camp is officially in the books. Reporting from the VMAC, the two main stars were the two highest paid defenders along the front line, which is good news for the Seahawks. We're going to be breaking it all down on our Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Glad to be joined, as always, by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang, and glad to have a second straight episode coming here live from the VMAC. Another exciting day at Seahawks training camp, second straight day with a padded practice. We get to see a lot of physicality out of the field, which certainly is exciting this time of year, leading towards preseason games and eventually the regular season. We'll be dishing out our offensive and defensive takeaways from today's practice, and we'll also be chatting with Vi Jones, the upstart second-year linebacker who had an interesting day today at Seahawks training camp. Perfect timing for him to come on the show and chat with him about where things sit as he tries to make this roster after being on the practice squad most of last season. A jam-packed episode coming your way, so let's get to it. Now for your lead story here on our Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This offseason, fixing the defensive line has been priority number one, number two, and number three for the Seattle Seahawks. They have spent a lot of money at that position, not just retooling it, adding new players like Dre'Mont Jones, but most recently giving Uchenna Nwosu a 3-year extension worth almost $60 million. So they have spent a lot of money. They've opened up the checkbook, and for good reason, Rob. We saw how bad this defense was last year defending the run. They finished 25th in scoring defense. And it's still way too early to know what these players are going to be able to do together. But if the last 2 days have been a sign of anything, we've gotten a glimpse, Rob, of just how dynamic these two players can be playing together, as they've basically been taking up residency in Seattle's backfield during scrimmage play.
Yeah, it really was exciting. As you mentioned, this was day 6 of the Seahawks training camp, but this was day 1 for me to attend training camp. And that was one of the big takeaways I took from it was just the dominance of Seattle's defensive line against Seattle's offensive line. And obviously there is some youth and some inexperience along Seattle's offensive line, but to be able to see the way that Dre'Mont Jones is just absolutely, tearing people apart at times. Just his penetrating ability, his power at the point of attack, that definitely was something that stood out to me. Jarran Reed as well, just his size and physicality. Mario Edwards Jr., Cameron Young, the rookie, they all were very impressive and kind of bottling up the run from the inside out today. And again, there is some youth, some inexperience along Seattle's offensive line. We should note that Seattle's top 2 running backs, Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet, at least Seattle's top running back in terms of where he was drafted a year ago with Charbonnet, were both out again. And so that is something that we have to at least acknowledge here. But still, it doesn't matter who's running the ball. It could be Walter Payton back there. If there's not holes to run through, you as a former running back yourself, Corbin, you know that as well as anybody, then it's just impossible. And that's, to me, is the most significant thing that I saw here, is because, as you said, run defense was clearly a priority for the Seahawks. They finished 30th in the NFL a year ago. The only 2 teams that finished worse, Chicago Bears and Houston Texans, who were 2 of the most woeful teams in all of the NFL a year ago. They were not a playoff team like the Seahawks were. So to see Seattle be as physical, as big, and then also versatile, having some undersized guys that do also can penetrate from the interior and pass rushing downs, that to me was the most intriguing thing about this. Is it did look like Seattle's defensive line, the front 7, as you mentioned, we're going to be talking to Vi Jones here in a little bit. I thought the linebacker play as well. So again, the front 7 and their physicality and their ability to stop the run, to me, was one of the real takeaways from my first day at Virginia Mason Athletic Center.
as you would expect, given the money that the Seahawks are paying Uchenna Nwosu and Dre'Mont Jones. I mean, you expect those guys to be making a bunch of plays during your training camp practice, but they have truly been backfield busters the last 2 days. These guys have been living back there, again, taking up rent. And most importantly, let's talk about Dre'Mont Jones, because the defensive tackle position, so much turnover. We know Poona Ford, Quentin Jefferson, Al Woods, Shelby Harris, those players are gone, and they've been able to restock that position with Dre'Mont Jones being the headliner. But literally the second play from scrimmage today, shoots into the backfield and blows up DJ Dallas for a tackle for loss. And then in the red zone period, right out of the gate, immediate penetration collapses the pocket, and the coaching staff had to use the quick whistle because Geno Smith was going to get devoured to open the red zone period. And seeing plays like that, that's what you paid $50+ million for a 3-year contract for Dre'Mont Jones for. You expect that he is going to make a difference in both those regards. And Uchenna Nwosu, it shouldn't be a surprise given what we saw last year, and yet today was utterly dominant, had 2 of the best plays that jumped out from practice. He had a quick sack where he got immediate penetration with Geno Smith rolling out to his right. Again, they had to initiate a quick whistle. And maybe the play that was most significant in terms of what it held back, the offense at the end of practice was on the verge of punching the ball into the end zone, the first team offense led by Geno Smith. And Uchenna Nwosu slants hard inside, gets between the tackle and the guard, gets into the backfield immediately, and Kenny McIntosh lost 3 yards on that play. It was a totally obliterated scheme for the Seahawks offense. Like, the play was ruined immediately off the snap, and those are the kind of plays that you love seeing from Uchenna Nwosu, creating those splash plays, and that ended up meaning the Seahawks did not score on that final drive. So that's how you want to finish a practice off if you are a standout defensive player. And with all the money they've invested in those 2 spots, Jarran Reed as well. I think Jarran Reed looks rejuvenated coming back to Seattle. They have not been able to move him off the line of scrimmage. Bobby Wagner was commenting on it yesterday. They weren't getting to me very often at the second level running the football. And the big reason for that is those 2 defensive tackles, but in particular, Jarran Reed playing that undersized nose. We're seeing the physicality and the toughness up front. He's incredibly strong for 306 pounds. We know that from his previous stint in Seattle, and just not getting moved off the line of scrimmage. That makes life so much easier for the linebackers to stay free behind and make plays. Or in the case of the Seahawks yesterday, they didn't even have to make plays. So the defensive linemen were the ones making those plays. So it's 2 practices. We don't want to get too exaggerated here in terms of what we've seen, but those 2 players working off each other, especially when they are on the same side, that is going to create a lot of problems for opposing offensive lines with their athleticism, their penetrating ability, and the fact that they both are good all-around football players that can rush the passer and defend the run.
Yeah, and to me, when you're looking and you're trying to evaluate different NFL teams, you're looking for the guys who are. I mean, every NFL club, of course, has a lot of good football players. Who are the difference makers? In the Seahawks, it seems like have not had difference makers in the front 7 for the last couple of years. Now, a rejuvenated Bobby Wagner might be able to help that. Certainly, Uchenna Nwosu and what he was able to provide a year ago, and then as you mentioned with Dre'Mont Jones and again the rejuvenated Jarran Reed. I mean, again, they were terrific today. It was a very impressive performance. And then with Dre'Mont Jones and Uchenna Nwosu in particular, you highlighted both those players. If you just focus in on those 2 guys, they are, you can just kind of watch the way that they are able to kind of create pandemonium at the point of attack. And that's the thing, is that they're not always making the actual play. They're not making the tackle themselves, but they are disrupting the same way Jadeveon Clowney, for example, was a guy that has not created as many sacks, as many tackles for loss as maybe his athletic ability might suggest. But the Seahawks fans who remember what Jadeveon Clowney was able to do for that limited time in which he was here, he was a guy that really made some big kind of plays. Same kind of thing here. And so to me, like when Dre'Mont Jones walked on the field, I was like, who's this number 55, this linebacker? I mean, because that's the kind of guy he's got a build. 6'3", 281 pounds is what he's listed on Seattle's roster. But for a guy that at 281 pounds, he's incredibly strong. And you mentioned the quickness, and the same thing with Uchenna Nwosu. So Seattle has a couple of players along that front 7 who maybe don't have the size that you might traditionally think with a scheme like this, but in terms of playmaking ability, they certainly have that, and that was absolutely on display today.
Yeah, it's really an encouraging sign here early in the padded practices. When you saw these guys getting into the backfield last week, it's like, well, they don't have pads on. There's really little to base off with that. But these have been as physical practices the last 2 days as I have seen at a Seahawks training camp. And that's a good thing, especially when you're trying to evaluate these players. For them to be making the plays they were with how physical it was in the trenches, I mean, that's real football, as close as you're going to get in training camp. And so it is an encouraging sign for the Seahawks, given the struggles that they had up front and the money that they had invested in those two players. They expect them to make game-changing plays the way they have the last 2 days. When we come back, we're going to have more observations from day 6 at Seahawks training camp, their second padded practice on offense and defense. We'll dish those out here in a moment on our Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. Our partners at eBay Motors have teamed up with Locked On Fantasy Football host Vinny Iyer to bring you some of the best fantasy picks each week, all season long. Whether you're prepping for a draft or scouting the waiver wire, every week we're going to provide players that are a guaranteed fit on your roster. With draft prep underway for the upcoming season, let's see who Vinny has picked out for us on this week's eBay Guaranteed Fit Fantasy Picks of the Week. Looking to park an elite running attack in your fantasy football garage after the top half dozen options at the position have been taken off the lot? You can still find a sleek ride in Tony Pollard, now the unquestioned feature back in the Cowboys offense after his breakout 2022 season. Without Ezekiel Elliott, Pollard's speed and acceleration will allow him to dominate key touches in a strong rushing attack. With eBay Guaranteed Fit and over 122 million parts and accessories for your vehicle right at your fingertips, you can make sure your ride stays running smoothly. Air filters, brakes, batteries, taillights, alternators, shocks, struts, you name it, eBay Motors has it, and they'll make sure it's the right fit for your car, because eBay Guaranteed Fit helps you understand exactly what part you need for your vehicle the first time. So go forth, switch gears, crank the AC, say goodbye to sweating your ride out if it needs a little fixing up, because now you know you'll always be set up for success from the get-go. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, everything your vehicle is calling for is just a click away. For the parts and accessories that fit your vehicle, just look for the green check. Get the right price, the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices at ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. You're listening to the Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm your host, Corbin Smith, going live here from the VMAC. Glad to be joined, as always, by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang. And a special thanks to all the 12s. We greatly appreciate you making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week, whether you're listening nearby in Boise, Idaho, or you're one of our listeners listening from Cairo, Egypt. We have listeners everywhere, and it's amazing. We greatly appreciate it. For our everydayers, tomorrow is a day off for the Seahawks, but that doesn't mean it's a day off for us. We're going to have plenty more home run hitting analysis coming out of the first 6 practices. We're going to play a little stock watch, maybe some updated 53-man roster projections as well midway through training camp. Going to be a really fun episode. Make sure you are listening in. Let's get back to practice number 6, shall we, Rob? And it was the second straight day the Seahawks were in pads. And as I mentioned a few moments ago, this has been as physical of padded practices as I can remember under Pete Carroll. They have been thumping each other out here. When you have players like Devin Witherspoon making their debut, and you know how much he likes to hit people, there's kind of going to be a little bit of an infectious energy out there when somebody like that bashes somebody. And then that's what happened today. We saw several big hits in the trenches. We saw Witherspoon deck D Eskridge. Eskridge didn't like that too much, got up into his face, and it really fired up the defense. But I think that when you look at this practice, there were a lot of encouraging signs from that standpoint. But I certainly think that there's probably some things that you want to talk about, and we were discussing this before the show, that maybe are not on the positive side of things, because this was your first camp practice that you got to attend in person. And you pointed out to me there was one position group that you were a little bit underwhelmed in terms of what you saw.
Well, I think that the center position continues to be a position of concern. And so that's where I'll kind of start things off. And I love that you mentioned Devin Witherspoon. I'm just going to talk about that for just a moment, because, again, while I have some concerns about center, if my top takeaway kind of coming from the very first practice would be, oh, my goodness, Geno Smith is absolutely the leader of this team. And the impact and the efficiency in which he plays in comparison. And I remain a Drew Lock fan. I'm a fan of Holton Ahlers as well. but Geno Smith, in the accuracy with which he demonstrated the touch and his ability to step up in the pocket, make some big plays over the top. To me, that was a top storyline. Devin Witherspoon, as you mentioned, the physicality and just the juice that he brings. It is similar to Jamal Adams in that there's just an infectious energy about this young man. To me, those are some of the top storylines. But hey, that's pretty low-hanging fruit here. I mean, first-round pick and the quarterback is the comeback player of the year in the NFL. Let's focus elsewhere. So, again, the center position, it was Oluwatimi who was getting the starting reps today. Evan Brown had previously had that, and I was encouraged by both of them, Corbin. I mean, both of them showed the initial quickness, the power, the wherewithal, just the understanding of where people were moving at the point of attack and how to get to the second level. I was encouraged by both of them. I was not overwhelmed by either of them. I didn't see either one of them say, okay, this is my job. I am taking it and running with it. The fact is, Seattle struggled with trying to create just short yardage running opportunities. I mean, this was a practice, in my opinion, which the defense kind of dominated. And again, there's a lot of veterans along Seattle's defensive line. We obviously have Bobby Wagner returning his instincts. I'm going to talk about this a little bit more in a second here with one of my other thoughts on this is the inside linebacker position. But starting off, to me, as I mentioned before, number one priority is the interior of the defensive and offensive line. I was encouraged by Oluwatimi. Again, I like the quickness. I thought his hands were a little bit further outside of the numbers on where I would like for a center to be. I think that's going to get you some holding calls in the NFL, and that is one of my concerns. At the same time, again, there were some blocks that he made and Evan Brown as well that I didn't think that either one of them were athletic enough to be able to get in space and be able to pin the linebacker and be able to create some runs. There were some runs by DJ Dallas and Kenny McIntosh in particular that I thought were cleared by quality blocks by both centers when they had their opportunities. So to me, this remains the number one positional battle that Seahawks fans should be paying attention to. And of course, we're going to be breaking it all down as we go through all of training camp.
Yeah, I thought that when we looked at the way that those guys played out there today, I was a little surprised in the sense that neither one of these guys is necessarily known for their second level blocking or being elite athletes. And yet DJ Dallas had a 40-yard touchdown run where Oluwatimi was able to get to the linebacker and seal him outside. And there was another play that Evan Brown was able to open up a big seam for Kenny McIntosh, where he was able to get to the second level climbing up and was able to win that position battle at the second level to create that crease for the running back. So this does feel like it's still a very wide open competition. You haven't seen somebody just jump out and say, this is my job. And I do think the ability to move guys off the line of scrimmage, that has been the one thing that's jumped out to me where I'm like, I'm not seeing that yet from either one of these guys consistently. Maybe that speaks to how much better the defensive line is for the Seahawks, but I'm going to say at this point, it's mostly that, hey, neither one of these guys has been able to get that job done. And I think the winner is going to have to be able to show more consistency, being able to create push at the line of scrimmage. As far as my biggest takeaway on offense, I want to stay on the offensive line. We could talk DK Metcalf, Jackson Smith, and Jig, but Tyler Lockett had a long touchdown today. It's another day that ends in Y, but those guys get tons of attention and for good reason. I want to talk about the offensive linemen that have stood out to me the most from a positive standpoint. And I got to start with Charles Cross. Today in one-on-ones, yesterday I mostly was watching the one-on-ones with receivers and corners. Today I decided I want to watch the buffet bashers and the defensive linemen. I want to see the big fellas get after it. And Charles Cross had a dominant effort against Darrell Taylor. Taylor beat him inside once with a spin move on a secondary move, but otherwise he was stonewalling him. He wasn't letting him get upfield on him. When he tried to bull rush him, he set a firm anchor and Taylor was looking like his feet were caught in quicksand. That is incredibly encouraging, especially when we know that the power pass rushing game was really where Charles Cross had the biggest issue. Not that Darrell Taylor's naturally a power rusher, but he's more than capable. We've seen him plow over tackles and show off more power than you expect. So I feel like Charles Cross has shown really good progress here. And Phil Haynes, he is living up to the hype in terms of what I thought. I thought he was going to be the most improved offensive lineman on this football team. And I think right now you can make an argument that he is the most improved lineman. for this football team. That DJ Dallas run, yes, there was a nice block by Oluwatimi, but what about the kick out block that was made by Phil Haynes on that play? There were a couple of pass rushing plays where he stonewalled guys. He was outstanding in the one-on-one drills. I thought from front to back in this practice that he was the best offensive lineman for the Seattle Seahawks. I felt like Cross and Lucas had their moments. Lewis had a few moments, but Phil Haynes kept being the guy, number 60. I'm like, that was a nice run block. That's good pass protection in drills, in team sessions. And so I think those two are your most improved offensive linemen. And if they can get consistent play from Phil Haynes in there and Charles Cross makes that big leap, this offense is going to be much more dangerous than it was a year ago, which is scary because they were a top 10 scoring unit last season.
They absolutely were, and I 100% agree with you on Phil Haynes. I've been a big fan of him going back to his days to Wake Forest. I'm going to stay on the offensive line just for a moment here. I was really impressed by Abe Lucas. I just think that, to me, Charles Cross, the left tackle, is going to get his fair share of criticism when he struggles, but also his praise at the left tackle position and the blind side spy. He's going to get that love. I think that Abe Lucas, to me, it just kind of legitimize what we saw a year ago. This is a good, solid football player. He may never become a Pro Bowler, but this is a guy that you absolutely can win with. And I wasn't so sure I was going to be saying that, considering the fact that Seattle had a pretty solid starter the year before with Jay Curran. They had drafted Stone Forsythe before. But to me, similar to what I mentioned before, where I think that Geno Smith has just kind of proven that he is above and beyond at the quarterback position, Abe Lucas is above and beyond at the right tackle position. And I think that you make a strong argument as well with Phil Haynes. But again, that was one of the things that we've talked about before that we were kind of expecting. I'm going to switch over here to the inside linebacker position. With the return of Bobby Wagner, we knew that number 54 there is obviously going to be the leader in the middle. But with Devin Bush taking a day off today, and I'm curious to hear why that was. I did not stick around enough to hear Clint Hurt's explanation of that. But Devin Bush did not practice today. He was in uniform on the sidelines and interacting with teammates, but it gave me an opportunity to see Bobby Wagner and do his magic, but then also to see guys like Vi Jones, to see guys like John Radican, to see guys like BBK, Ben Burke-Kirven come back. And, that's a fun story. It's something that should be in a Lifetime movie or something with all that Ben Burke-Kirven has overcome to get himself into position to play. But if you can't play, then it remains just a Lifetime movie. But this is the NFL. We've talked about before. That stands for not for long if you actually can't play. And the instincts that BBK, John Radigan, and Vi Jones demonstrated today, to me, confirms that Seattle has a little bit better depth, the inside linebacker position, than I thought that they might have. And I say confirm because I know that they're talented. I know they're talented athletes. Radigan, to me, is, again, one of the more instinctive linebackers I've watched in a long time. And Vi Jones and BBK, just go back to the pro day numbers that they put up, the combine numbers that BBK put up. They're absolutely spectacular. But they're great athletes. To see that be demonstrated here on the field, especially considering that in BBK's case, again, he's coming off of the injury. In Vi Jones' case, he's added 10, maybe 15 pounds of muscle. Previously been an outside linebacker, now is playing inside. That was very encouraging to me as well, because again, I really liked what I saw from Devin Bush previously, and do think that he is going to be one of those players who really could excel in a little bit more of a player-friendly kind of a coaching environment like he's going to have here, previous to, different than what he had previously. So to me, that was inside linebacker was a position I had some concern with, but not quite as much after watching today's practice.
I can't say that reserve safety was a spot that I was necessarily concerned about, because we've been talking about the competition that you've got set to happen there with Joey Blunt and Jarek Reed the second and Jonathan Sutherland, the undrafted rookie out of Penn State. Even without a healthy Jamal Adams so far, he's on the PUP list. He hasn't practiced yet. The safety depth is just as impressive in my mind as what the cornerback depth is. Every time I turn around, I keep seeing number 35, and that's Joey Blunt. He is making plays. Today, had a blitz, blew up a run play in the backfield. He had that awesome play last week where he pulled the ball away from Griffin Hebert and took off for a long touchdown on what I think would have been ruled a fumble recovery by NFL rules, but he has been everywhere during this training camp so far. Jarek Reed II today had a really impressive play playing with the ones in the red zone, knocked the ball out of DK Metcalf's hands as he went down to the ground in the back right corner of the end zone. I hadn't seen him make any plays with the ones. He got his opportunity today, so he's impressing. And Jonathan Sutherland, you want to talk about a guy that has kind of struggled in training camp, if we're being honest. The first couple practices gave up some big plays and coverage, but today had 2 pass breakups, and you could see that the game is starting to slow down a little bit for him. So that's turning into a really exciting competition. You add in the fact that Kobe Bryant is working some at safety now. I mean, that is a position that is incredibly deep, even without Jamal Adams. When you get number 33 back, that's going to be a lot of fun to watch that competition unfold, because you might be able to only keep 1 or 2 of those 3 players I mentioned. And if Kobe Bryant is competing for safety slots, that makes it even more interesting. So I think the corner depth is fantastic, but the safety depth is right on par. And we're seeing it with the plays we're seeing from players in all 3 units on defense. These guys are proving to be playmakers. There's a lot of versatility in that group. It's a lot of fun to watch. You're listening to the Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined, as always, by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang. And a special thanks to all the 12s. Thanks for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. Everydayers, we'll be back tomorrow with some of our winners here so far in the first 6 training camp practices, maybe some revised 53-man roster projections and much more. Going to be a really fun episode. Make sure that you are listening in. The Seahawks might be off, but Locked On Seahawks won't be. We'll be ready to roll with a new show. Earlier this week, I was able to catch up with Vi Jones. And as you mentioned, Rob, he had an interesting opportunity today. He got to play all the snaps next to Bobby Wagner with the ones. What a difference from last year, where they couldn't even figure out where they were going to play him. He was playing some outside linebacker. He was playing off-ball linebacker. Didn't make the team, was on the practice squad because of his special teams abilities, and got to play in 3 games. No official stats, and here he is, 10 pounds heavier. It's been an interesting offseason for him, and now with Jordan Brooks being out, it looks like the Seahawks are giving him that first opportunity to be that next linebacker in line behind Bobby Wagner and Devin Bush, getting all those first team reps today. We've seen the coverage skills, the incredible interception that he had a few practices ago today, had a couple plays where he was against Tyler Lockett and he gave up completions, but it looked like a corner was defending against Tyler Lockett, had really sound coverage on those plays. So there's a lot of excitement about what Vi Jones is going to bring to this defense, both now and in the future. He looks to be a player that Pete Carroll and Clint Hurtt are really excited about developing. Let's take a listen as I caught up with Vi Jones at Seahawks training camp.
So how did the offseason go for you, good sir?
The offseason was great. I enjoyed my time off. I took a trip with my family and then got to work with my brother. Me and him were just training. We trained in Arizona, we trained in Henderson, Nevada. So we're just back in the heat, out there getting at work.
I think you probably saw the tweet that I posted. I noticed I thought that you looked like you'd put on a little bit of muscle. Is there truth to that, or are my eyes lying?
Yeah, for sure. I'm just trying to get stronger, stay healthy, build my frame and whatnot, So
what were the biggest focuses to make that happen? Because I think you came in last year at 225.
Yeah, I dinged up my knee a little bit, so I just was trying to strengthen my legs, and get some weight on my arms, weight on my body.
Any changes that you did to accomplish that? Because obviously you're coming from D1 programs that have
just working harder, working hard and smart, giving myself the right nutrition, the right sleep. So, just getting after it.
Get your first game experience last year. I believe you played in 3 games on special teams. What was that experience like for you? Obviously, preseason going to the regular season, those are 2 totally different animals.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. And my first game was in Munich, so that was an experience that not a lot of people get to experience. And I don't know, I think I was just soaking in the whole moment, and remembering my job and my assignment and going out there and trying to make plays for my teammates.
Biggest lessons that you learned in those few games that you get to play in? Were there any welcome to the league moments for you? It's different when you're going against starters in the NFL than even the preseason.
I think definitely when the Bucs game, I was on kick return and me and another teammate had to get a double team, and I didn't really do my job to the best of my ability, and one of my teammates got dinged up his hand. So yeah, that was probably just an eye-opening for me. Like, I got to make sure I'm ready every play. I got to, bring it with everything I got.
Last year, you were doing some rotating off the edge, and you were also playing some off ball. And that looks like they have you exclusively playing off ball. Where's your comfort level now at that position, especially in this scheme? This is the second year you get to play in this defense.
To be honest, my comfort level was just in between the white lines, just playing football. Whatever my coaches want me to play, I'm gonna just do that as best as I can. I just like playing football. I like keeping the team from scoring. I like making the crowd go crazy, and so just playing football. I played a little bit of both in college, back and forth, so I think I'm just naturally comfortable playing.
That particular position, what are some areas, watching film or looking back what you did last preseason, and you're like, these are some areas I really need to attack?
Outside or inside?
Inside.
Just running full speed all the time. Knowing, like I said, my assignment, know what's going on in front of me, know what's going on behind me. And just continue to make plays, show that I've been growing and I'm still growing, and I have still a lot of room to grow.
How much has having number 54 out there been a boon for you and for the rest of your linebacking crew? Him being gone a year and then coming back in year 12, still being able to chase down Derek Young on a jet sweep at 33.
Well, for me, I wasn't here when Bobby was here, but just the dynamic that he brings to the whole franchise and the team, it's a blessing to be able to see. He brings his knowledge in the film room. He speaks on everything he knows. He's played a lot of football in 10, 11, 12 years, whatever. So he's a seasoned vet. He's been in a lot of situations, and he always voices that. His knowledge, and it helps the whole room. It brings everyone. Gives everyone a lot of fire. We have more stuff to play for. We can't let him down. Let the Seahawks and the other legends down. You know what I mean?
How beneficial is it to be able to watch him now on the practice field? Just knowing over 1,500 tackles in his career. I believe 9 All-Pro selections, and now you get to watch him, not just learn from talking with him, but learn from his example.
Yeah, it's like I said, another blessing to be able to watch someone like that. Just like you said, he's made a lot of tackles. He's a future Hall of Famer. So being able to learn from him, watch him, and be able to play with him, it just brings some more juice to your game. You know what I'm saying? So I've been enjoying it. I love it.
Now in your second training camp, getting ready for your second set of preseason games, what ultimately is your goal? What are you looking to accomplish this year?
Like I said again before, just show my growth, show that I'm growing and show that I'm still growing, continue making plays, putting on for the defense, knowing my assignments, knowing what's going on in front of me, knowing what's going on behind me, to be able to help direct traffic, help tell my teammates what's going on, and continue making plays.
He gets the opportunity to continue making plays now in training camp for the Seahawks, getting his first reps with the ones today with Bobby Wagner. Certainly an impressive young man that has improved a lot since signing on as an undrafted free agent with the Seahawks last year. Going to be looking forward to see what Vi Jones does here in coming weeks as he tries to battle for one of those final roster spots with the Seahawks. As always, you can follow me on Twitter, Corbin Smith NFL. You can follow Rob at Rob Rang. Make sure to subscribe and follow Locked On Seahawks on YouTube, wherever you listen to podcasts, to make sure you don't miss a single episode. Coming up tomorrow, we'll have some updated 53-man roster projections now that 6 games are in the books, and much more detail coming out of training camp this first week and a half of camp at the VMAC. You'll want to listen in. Thanks for tuning in to our Tuesday episode, and enjoy the rest of your day. Go Hawks.